Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to DCon, Day 3, 2022. Has everybody had fun so far this weekend? Nice. My name is Mark Brickey. I'm the host of Adventures in Design podcast with over 1,600 episodes talking to folks all across the creative space. Today, we are talking about the evolution of collectibles, getting into the Web3. That's a big topic on the stage today. We have on the far end of the table, Mr. Busy himself, Kevin of DCon, and one of the founding members of the Vincents, which is a new program that DCon rolled out, which is sort of a new half step, a space somewhere between going fully digital, but also taking 1 foot out of the physical world with a program that offers both real world incentives as well as digital incentives. Kevin, we're 3 days into the Vincents being live. How's it going so far, bud?
It's going great. I think there's a very good vibe over there in our booth, which is right over here at the stage. And then people are very excited and have explored what it's about and have curiosity about it. And there's a lot of great art there. And we're sitting with some of the best artists that we have at DesignerCon.
Absolutely. When you and I did the podcast and we spoke about the Vincents, I sort of celebrated it that it was a great first step for people that haven't bought into digital yet, but because there are incentives like being able to get your tickets to DCon 2023 and other real-world attributes, have you seen that sort of work? Are people buying into the digital space for the first time through the Vincents?
Yes. So I think for all the ones that we've sold so far, a lot of people found that part being very valuable for them. For the price that you're buying right now and you're getting for 2023 weekend pass right away, that's your access. And there's different things. We're giving free gifts over there and raffles and also prizes as well. And it depends on which one you get. There's going to be special things added to the Vincents membership. So some of them could get lifetime VIP access. Some of them could get a few years VIP access. So things like that are very interesting to a lot of people that's coming here, because a lot of our attendees haven't heard of what it's about or what it is, so they're just learning it right here on the spot at DesignerCon.
We are joined today by Frank Kozik, who is right next to me, checking out the under part of the table, how it works.
Spilled my coffee.
Spilled his coffee. Hey, that's a disaster in my world. Frank has been on the forefront of so many different trends, independent music, posters for silkscreen posters for concerts, bringing that back to a whole new generation of artists and consumers, as well as one of the first artists to really get into the vinyl toy movement here in the States. Frank, what do you think that the digital space, Web3, what do you think that it needs to do to have the same amount of desirability and collectability that you've seen in all those other chapters of your amazing career?
I think that it's followed the same sort of collector cycle, just really accelerated. And unfortunately, in the sort of like normal world NFT space, a lot of shenanigans have gone on, but there are a few players that are actually building out, such as Vivi, and what I'm seeing DesignerCon doing, that are, it's not just like buy this crappy PFP because you'll make money off it, but there's actually like a long-term investment in a real world activity and in like the community of like fellow collectors or fellow art appreciators or whatever. So I think it's progressing really well. I think that it will continue to progress over time, and you got to understand that a very small percentage of people actually know about it, but over time it will become part of everyday life, just like having your iPhone or whatever. And so I think it's kind of a, for lack of a better word, a genre that's here to stay and will keep going on. And as companies and teams start to provide the utility word, okay, a little bit overused, but for example, you pull the right Vincent, you're a VIP for 5 years. That's a pretty nice reward for collecting that thing, right? So I like digital collectibles. I'm a collector myself. The big problem that they solve is storage, degradation of the materials over time. If your house burns down, your collection is still there. Right, at a basic level. So I think for a collector, it solves a lot of those issues. Like me, I have storage units full of boxes. It's kind of sad, right? It's much nicer if it's all on my phone.
I think one of the things you said in there that is interesting to me is when companies like VV came out that was doing a controlled experience, all the cowboys over on the blockchain were a little bit like, well, what is this? Because it's in a controlled environment. But like you, I believe that controlled environment offers a level of safety or customer confidence that, you know, because when
there's also a context, like your peer group is clearly defined, not just on some random clubhouse room or a Twitter space, because that stuff's so ephemeral, right?
Right.
But in like being able to actually come together in the real world once or twice a year at events like this, and you know, it's going to be like going to our Disneyland at some point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm interested in. And, you know, I've gone through lots of eras of underground art. And being someone that grew up on science fiction, I've been waiting. Like, it's cool, it's happening. The next couple of decades are going to be very interesting for artists, collectors, pop culture, all that stuff.
Scott Tolson sitting next to Frank is the designer of the Vincents logo. Scott is a great example of work that he did going back years, probably a favor for a friend, now has a whole new evolution to it. Scott, what is it like to see this thing that you're like, yeah, I'll make you a logo for your little art show? What is it like for you to see this have a whole renaissance and become an actual like club that people can join?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, working with Ben many years ago on the logo, it was a favor for a friend. Mm-hmm. And it was, you know, Ben and I like having a quick discussion about what the logo was, me doing some quick sketches to show him, and, you know, the logo itself was relatively quick, you know, I made it very quickly. But yeah, it's crazy. I walking around the floor this year, you know, every year I walk around, I see like a Vincent something that I didn't know about.
Right.
Like it's a new thing. Like I was just over at the, yesterday I walked by the bear brick area and I saw this gigantic bear brick, and I was like, I had no idea that was a thing. Yeah. So, and then even going by the Vincent booth and seeing all the giveaways and stuff like that, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's yeah, for how small it started, and now the NFT happening, and you know, Ben and I and Kevin and Kingston and company met like months ago and talked about this NFT and what we were gonna do, and everyone, the vibe was just, everyone was like, yeah, let's do it, let's go, let's do it. And I will say the process of creating it went a little slower than I expected, just with all the attributes you have to add, and just, I mean, it's a lot of just busy work, but I'm glad that we're finally here and it's being released, and people are excited about it.
And what Scott's referring to is in the attributes, you essentially had to make so many different variables for Vincent, correct? Because in the blind box nature, when you buy one, you don't know what you're getting. So Scott had to sit at home and be like, I gotta make 500 eyeballs, I gotta make 20 hats, I gotta make all these different variables, so that when you buy one and you open up your blind box, computer-generated software takes all these different variables and makes a unique Vincent right there. So how was it making all these little bitty pieces independently and be like, where is this even going when the computer makes one?
Yeah, the wildest thing is like all the attributes don't work together. Like sometimes you'll do a set of eyes and, you know, a set of like a nose or something, and you turn those on and it's either like the colors don't match, or there's overlapping shapes, just like really funky stuff. So when I was doing the NFT, I was trying to be as conscious as I could about not doing things that would clash, or colors that would clash, or overlapping attributes and all those things. So it was kind of using a different part of my brain that I normally do, because I'm trying to think forward and like how all these pieces can fit together.
It's like editing a movie as an animator. You're working on one little splice, and you got to make sure that it lines up with the scene before and the scene after. It reminds me a lot of, does anybody at the table remember fashion plates or monster plates, where you would get those tiles and you would lay them down, and then you would scribble over the top, and you could, like, you had heads, torsos, and legs. Like, when I saw that, it reminded me of the same thing.
I created the NFT in Illustrator, which is a vector-based program, if you don't know. And every attribute had its own layer. No, it's got to be more than that. Yeah. So what I did is I split it. I mean, it's getting kind of technical, but
Let's go.
I would have a folder that was labeled eyes, right? And then within that eyes folder, I would have maybe like 20 sets of eyes, but some of those eyes have variances too. So that would be a sublayer. So it was just like, it's the most layers I've ever had on a file that I've ever worked on.
But for you, Scott, I mean, I know that your full-time job is that you work over at Disney. And so when you walk the floor here, you see so many of the characters of Disney retooled, reimagined, remixed by all the artists here. We see Mickey Mouse doing everything here this weekend. What's it like for you to go up to booths and see artists reinterpreting and remixing Vincent?
So I'll be honest, that was loud. So when I walk around, I try and not think about Disney stuff because
Sure.
that's like my day
It's
job.
your day job.
Yeah, so I'm trying to like not think about that as much being here. So, when I see those kind of twists on the character.
Well, the question was the twist on your character. Like when you see people, because there's people out here that have done twist on Vincent.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of those. I haven't seen many of those, though.
There's a handful
Is
out there, and I thought you might find it interesting to see your own character getting mixed up like the stuff that you do during your day job.
I've seen a couple of like twists on the logo itself for like people's booths and things like that, but I haven't seen much other stuff.
It's out there if you find it.
Okay, I'll look for it.
We also are joined by Joe Ledbetter. Joe, how you doing, bud?
Good. I'm good.
You're an interesting guy because when you got into toys, you really messed with the geometric shape of your toys. You purposefully put a flatness that doesn't necessarily exist in the real world, but exists in the illustration world. And I always have loved that about your artwork, and then how you paint your artwork to even more reinforce that play on geometry that you do. How do you see pulling off things like that in the digital space? Like, you kind of already reinterpreted the real world from the illustration world. How do we reverse that and go back into digital goods and still keep some of that Joe Ledbetter magic?
I suppose it would just be just the way I paint. I mean, doing sort of forced shading, forced perspective a little bit on some of the designs. But I would just treat it like I would treat a digital painting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you hear Scott talking about all the attributes of doing Vincent, sounds a lot like making blind box toys, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, God, you got to be so organized with all those layers, man. I mean, that must be quite a chore.
Frank, for me, when I started to see the variable NFTs, I was kind of like a lot of artists. I didn't really get, why would I want to buy a JPEG or a GIF? But when I started to see artists like Mike Mitchell do the variable NFTs, where there's all the attributes and you buy one and it's auto-generated, it immediately hit me of the fun of buying my first dunny and going into the blind box world. And then all of a sudden, digital clicked for me because it was experiential. I wasn't just buying a digital version of something that existed. I was buying a digital experience where something was being generated for me, and it's the fun of opening up the box and not knowing what you're getting. With your partnership or your leadership over at Kid Robot, what you've done as an artist in the past, how important do you think it is for artists and companies to still try to make that experience where we make shopping fun for adults?
Well, the thing is that like, it's important for artists to push the envelope as much as possible because we kind of live in a golden age for the arts. Really interesting stuff is happening with like artists, traditional artists, messing with AI now and getting really good, and like understanding like camera effects to influence the image. So I think that the more a creative artist can understand, like to me, okay, there's kind of like, was this false divide? There's a physical item, and this is really art, and this is a digital image, and it's not really art, but it is actually just another kind of art. So it's like if you're a designer and you make a toy and you make stickers, you might as well do the other thing too. So I don't see it as a replacement or an enemy to the physical world. I see it as an additional thing, and then you can do combinations and you start playing off the two formats and doing combos. And that's where it actually gets like super interesting, because I went through this with the advent of digital sculpting, right? Like all the traditional sculptors were pissed, but it's like my imagination can run freer in a digital sculpt than a physical sculpt. And so why would I not want to use that paintbrush, right? So for me, I don't have any conflicts between, I've been doing this for like a pretty long time, about 40 years, and I've always explored the new technology. Once upon a time, it was a Xerox machine. Now it's a supercomputer in my home, right? It's just a better tool set each time. The core principles of creativity, aesthetics, design, putting in stories, social commentary into your work, those are unchanged. You just have like another interesting way to do it that happens to have instant reach across the entire world, right? You don't have to find my poster on a telephone pole. Like, it's on the internet.
Right.
It's a golden age for designers.
When you got involved with Kid Robot, you really started to push the company in a direction of lots of licensing IP. You believe that digital is going to be here to stay. It's not a fad. It's something that's going to last the long haul. How important do you think licensing is to this space to keep bringing in bigger audiences? Because Spider-Man, for example, is the thing that gets them to walk through the digital space, but then maybe they go further down the line and they discover someone like Joe or Scott.
So, there's a difference between a for-profit business and an individual artist's vision, right? At a certain point, I'm given the responsibility of running this company and making it successful. That means we have to grow the company.
Right.
And behind that is we're responsible for everyone that works at the company and people that have collectors that have been invested in our company for a while. I have to keep the company alive so their collections have a context, right? Because how many great toy companies came and went and no one even knows about the toys anymore? But there's a price for everything. So yeah, I sell a lot of mainstream IP into Target now, but that's what allows us to make the art toys. Because I'll be real honest, it's impossible to run a company of any scale just making art toys without something else going on. Even a company like Medicom, they're manufacturing things that are not toys, and that's kind of what's paying the bills, right? So I'm not conflicted because I'm not emotionally invested in a bunch of Batman plush at Target, but if I can take the money from that and make an artist toy with it for the company,
Right.
okay, that's a pretty good use of the funds.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely it does. And that's when I saw Vivi get into the space. What made me excited about it is like, well, if they're bringing Disney into this space, they're also bringing Disney fans into this space. And then when they're in there, they go down a rabbit hole, and next thing you know, who is Tara McPherson? How have I not heard of her before?
Exactly. So my launches on Vivi have all sold out. I think I've sold something like 40,000 pieces or something. I lost track. Most of the people that collected those did not know that there was actual physical Labbit toys and Labbit plush and all this other history of Labbit. And when they find out, they're delighted. And so every time a company like Vivi sells a digital item that's associated with an artist, that artist's sales of like what he really wants to make, maybe the physical thing, is going to increase because a new customer just showed up. A new appreciator just showed up. Like Vivi's creating like not hundreds, but like tens of thousands of new fans. Like next year's DesignerCon is going to be insane because all the Web3 people that are out there jonesing right now and watching it live streamed, they're all going to come next year.
Right.
Right? So it's not competition, it's boosting. It's boosting everything else in here. I think it's perfect. And I think the way that DesignerCon is understanding and integrating, this is already kind of like, I've been to a lot of cons, hundreds. DesignerCon's the best one right now, and it's going to keep getting better. So this is a really cool year, actually, because this is kind of the year it's kind of happening.
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic.
I agree with your optimism because, as Kevin and I were talking about, last year was the first year that digital was at DCon, and you saw people waiting in line to meet Jermaine Rogers, but at the top of the hour pulling their phone out to see if they got that drop. And it was a really great example of seeing the two worlds live in harmony, showing that they share the same customer. And what I'm so excited about, Kevin, and what you guys have done a great job with, is creating the whole Web3 wing of DCon this year. And I think that it's awesome for people to go into those booths and see these aren't all Satan's pirates. They're not all people on the internet trying to also get your social security. It's like real businesses that are trying to create a space where artists are more free to move faster and celebrate this community of creativity. And you guys have done a good job of supporting it. I think more so than any other art, convention or festival that I'm aware of.
Yes, I'm super proud of our team. Ben, Scott, and Kingston, and the rest
Our man
of our
Kingston
team.
here in the front row is the main dude behind the Vincents.
That we worked really hard the last few months with the Vincents project, the membership itself, and also Friends of Vincents. We want to call these projects that's involved with DesignerCon this year our friend. We're a community. We're community DesignerCon fans and collectors. So they're all our friends, and a lot of them have never done an in-person event. A lot of these companies and projects. Yeah. So they're stoked to see what this is about, what DesignerCon's about, and they're loving it. And I think our attendees and our fans are loving it as well, get to learn a lot of things that they didn't know about. You have the digital world, but a lot of these projects and companies are bringing them to the physical world as well, and vice versa. So we are, like Frank said, we are at the integration step. This is, to me, I'm biased. I'm on the team. The best convention in the world. I've spoke to Joe yesterday. I saw Joe.
Dude, I've gone to all of them for decades. This is like, I'm amazed this has happened.
Yeah. Thank you. And all three of you know where I came from, which is funny, right? Like I was just telling, I never in my life imagined I would be sitting on a panel here and running this place with Ben and Alex to become what it is now today. And the future is even brighter. Yeah. I can tell all of you guys that a lot of people and influential people that came through the doors this year have told us that they're all in with DesignerCon. And I can't wait to show everyone where we're going next.
Well, one of my favorite things about DesignerCon is there's a blue-collar art vibe here. There's a lot of people in the back with a table, and you can see that they're going to just keep moving up the ranks, and there's so much cross energy of different artists speaking to each other and supporting each other. And for an artist like Scott, who created the Vincents, what do you think makes a great character for other artists that are listening to this on the podcast or watching over on YouTube? What do you think made the character design sturdy, or how do you go about making a character that is sturdy enough to be able to have so many different variables applied to it? When you did that favor for Ben way back, there's ways it could have gone where you're like, hey man, we're stuck with this. It's an octopus, it is what it is. But you were able to build a platform years later that you were able to build so many different ideas off of. Speak a little bit about character design and how you make one that goes the long haul.
So yeah, with the Vincent, it's funny when I look at the original DCon Vincent logo and that character, I look at it now and I'm like, I don't necessarily love it just because of how quickly it came and looking at it for so long, I'm like, I should have done it this way or that way. And luckily every year we do sort of a new logo, where we kind of update the Vincent character for the logo. And then with the NFT, we went back and forth because I was like, maybe that character design is too simple to make, an NFT from. So how do I evolve Vincent into something with a little more flexibility to add different things and maybe not be so simple. So there was a few back and forths with just, how do I evolve the design? And I think with the NFT, we got to a good spot where, with the character, we keep the kind of fun, cute aspect of Vincent, giving it a little more detail, and but still keeping that funness to it, which is what DCon is all about.
Yeah.
So yeah, the NFT didn't, the style, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is what I was trying to like evolve, and I think we got to a good point where, just able to just create the different aspects of it to make it, charming and keep the charm to it.
It's so interesting that when I learned that you were the artist who did that, because for a long time I had no idea. And knowing the work that you've done for Kid Robot, and by the way, the beautiful piece that you did for Wakanda Forever over at Disney's California Adventure behind the Hyperion Theater, amazing showpiece there. It's so funny, like now looking back on it, it is kind of angular. It's a little bit hard on his edges, but I noticed when you took it into NFT space, you really kind of got in there and thought, what is the personality of Vincent? You put a little bit more expression in it, so then it could splinter off in all these different ways. So it's a really cool case study of a logo or a mascot and how it evolves. But I think it's also a cool case study for all these artists that are here. You never know where a favor for a friend's going to lead you to, right? Joe, as we're talking about DCon and how it's, such an empowering event from the front wall to the back wall and all the different careers that are in here. As a hardworking, well-known freelance artist such as yourself, how do you think this one stands out amongst some of the other events that you do?
Well, Kevin, is this the 17th? Something like that? 17th year. This is the best. I mean, I feel like everyone really stepped up this year.
How many have you done?
I've been to every one.
You've done all 17?
I haven't had a booth at all 17, but I've been at more than 17 because I was at other things called VTN and Keyology. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Maybe 3 people at DesignerCon, but yeah, I mean, this is the best year.
I mean, wasn't the first one? I think I went to it too. Was in a basement in a community center or something.
That's the
and there were
Keyology.
12 tables.
But I don't know if that was.
It was called something else then.
Keyology. There was a key one in the basement at the Pasadena Convention Center.
That's the first one I remember.
But I don't know if that was related to DesignerCon. Maybe it was just a.
There was 2 years, I believe, because when I was researching for this weekend, there was a couple years where it had a different name. Then it becomes DesignerCon. Then Kevin joins the team.
Yeah.
And then we're blazing.
So it's VTN. It started as VTN.
Yeah.
VTN is what I remember.
That's what we are from. Archaeology is something else, but that Ben kind of talked to them. They didn't want to do it anymore. So that's how VTN started it. And in 2009, we changed the name to DesignerCon to include more scope than just toys, because there's designers everywhere and illustrators and painters. And there's more so than ever now with the digital world that we're creating here.
Yeah, and when VTN started, it was literally 2 aisles, just so you know how...
That was 2007, right?
Yeah, and just so you know how...
I was there. I was selling Kid Robot hoodies that I had. They sent me my own. I was selling my samples of Kid Robot stuff at that.
Yeah.
Out of a cardboard box.
I remember I attended a few of them and then I exhibited, but the first 2 or 1 that I went to, it was literally 2 aisles, and you would be done in 10 minutes.
Well, I think the success and how it's scaled, it always comes from the top down. And if you've ever been fortunate enough to go to the offices in Glendale, you see that Ben is an insane fucking collector. And only a collector that nuts could build something for other collectors as crazy as him. And I always have to sort of share that to people. I'm like, because people are like, who's the guy that runs it? I'm like, oh, Ben is you. He is the hardest of hardcore collectors. So Joe, let's talk about this for a second. With your series that you just did for Disney, Mickey and Friends, you did something that you also had to do for the Vincents. You have the Fab Five from Disney, or you have Vincent from DCon, but then you have to reskin it like Joe Ledbetter. Let's talk a little bit about when an artist with a very signature style like yours, that I love, goes into a platform and you have to stare at it and go, okay, this is cool, but what's Joe's version of Mickey Mouse? Or what's Joe's version of Goofy or Vincent?
Yeah, well, Mickey and Friends were really challenging. I mean, they're deceptively simple. I mean, my process for that project was I bought a bunch of Mickey and Friends toys on eBay and just customized them and tried to figure out how my line and my style would even work just on a regular figure, and then sort of pull it back from there, and then I just sort of created, like a pretty rough idea. My process is I have a pretty rough idea of what I want to do, and then I work really closely with sculptors, sort of live usually, and because of that pandemic, we were just doing it over Zoom, which actually was even more helpful because we could share screens and I could draw over the ZBrush sculpts and things, and it's much easier than using words. So I usually find the toy and the design at the end and the sculpt, and Disney really let me do. They were pretty hands off. I mean, very few notes, and the notes I got were really good, and they've got people there that have been working for 40 years drawing Mickey and Goofy and everybody, and to have them, draw over my characters, it was you could tell they were perfect. They could just draw these characters so perfectly and effortlessly, and it was just such a thrill to work with them and be part of that project.
When I worked on my projects for Disney, there were so few notes back. I was like, is this really happening, or is this some sort of prank?
Yeah.
Like, I was like scared because I was expecting them to rip everything apart.
Yeah.
And they were just like, I was like, what's happening
I kept
here?
expecting the project to be canceled
Yeah,
again
me
and
too.
again, and I didn't, until it comes out, I just didn't believe it.
I'm like, they're gonna let
So-
me get to the end and be like, we changed their mind.
I just have a question. Are there 2 Disneys? Because
Yeah, there is. There's when
about
you're an
17,
employee and when you're a
dude.
freelancer. So, Joe, as somebody who's had, a successful career in toys and art prints and the different things that you've done to build out your freelance and keep building the name Joe Ledbetter, are you in on Web3, or are you still a little bit skeptical? Like, have you found your place in this new space yet?
I don't really know what Web3 is.
NFTs,
So-
digital goods, this whole movement that we're sliding towards?
I'm despite using the computer a lot, I'm actually a pretty analog guy, and I just trust Ben and Kevin. I've been pitched a lot of NFT projects over the past few years, and I just always been pretty reluctant. So I just trusted these guys and kind of went for it with them.
I mean, that's cool though, right? That think about how many artists we know had never collected vinyl toys or got into it until somebody like Frank or Kid Robot was like, you want to do one of these? Because I know in the early wave, there was a lot of guys like Frank that were actually, leaning on some of their friends and being, Jermaine, what do you think about doing one of these? Or your art would fit really, really well for that. I mean, maybe not Jermaine. I'm just pulling somebody off the top of my head by the look of your eyebrows, but.
What's that? There's a lot of echoing here, so I missed that
it's
whole
hard to hear
last
you,
2
too.
sentences.
We could use some monitors in front of us. But to wrap it up today, Frank, I would like to know from you, where do you think, you believe this is going to be around for a while, the NFT space. What do you think some of the biggest obstacles are that it has to sort of get over with to get consumer confidence and to scale to that next level?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of a catch-22. So the ideal is that it's decentralized, and so therefore, instead of the tech, like right now, when you go on the internet, you're being pretty manipulated because all the algorithms are real smart and they're manipulating you. So what has to happen in the Web3 space is there has to be mechanisms provided by the people issuing the NFTs, right? Where you can manipulate the algorithm a little bit. So it's a little bit more of a back and forth. When that happens, there has to be some level of control, but not total control, because what we have right now is just a lot of bad players got into the game and sort of ripped everybody off. I think that sort of Wild West era is definitely over, okay? So I think it's going to condense to a smaller group of users who know how to do it, And then there will be successful long-term projects like VV or what you guys are doing, right, with Web3. And then you'll slowly get mass adoption because people will start using it for things that aren't art and collectibles.
Right.
And it'll become a normal thing, just like once upon a time, it's like, what, I have a credit card? I can just use this thing to get stuff, and now, like, I have it on my phone.
Right.
I mean, 20 years ago, people would have been like, you're crazy, that won't work. It will become normal, and as it becomes normal, someday everybody in the world will be using it.
One of the things I've always really respected about you is how you don't say no, you just look at the possibilities of new trends. And I've always respected about you, and it also seems like that's where DCon's mindset is at as well, right, Kevin? I mean, you guys dove into digital last year. We've already seen it double. As Frank is predicting, and as I think you and I both know, it's going to be even bigger for 2023.
Yes, I think what Frank is predicting and how he sees the future is exactly what we think, our team, is imagine a world, it could be next year if you're part of the Vincents membership, where you use your phone and you just go through instead of going to registration here, waiting down there, we go through the door, we're going to have a person there with a phone or iPad, you tap, you go right in. And what's unique about what we have is what Scott and Frank and Joe did for us is you're getting a one-on-one unique art as a membership.
Right.
So there's value to both, right? That's the main thing that we're addressing here is it's just not a card or barcode that doesn't do anything. Okay, you can come through the door, but there's value to the art itself and what it means to each one of you. If somebody gets, let's say somebody pulls a Frank Kozik one-of-one, Vincent, they didn't want it, so they put it up for sale. But there's a collector out there that's really want and collect everything that Frank does. Now that person's gonna have a one-of-one digital membership of his art forever. And what that gets you in the long term is actually VIP access to DesignerCon forever as well. So there's attributes to that, and we will be adding different things and utility and benefits, at different events. Even this year, it's not wide yet. This year, if you have gotten the Vincents membership, you would have gotten a Vincents Safubi. You were able to purchase a Vincent Safubi by Punk Drunkers. If you didn't have one, you had no access to that. You wouldn't be able to purchase.
Yeah.
Like rather than doing the traditional raffle system and all that, we're including our members and communities in a way that has never done before, and that can be controlled and can be communicated to everybody within a community like this. So I think for us is having that, it'd be easy for people to come into the show, can be set up different events throughout the year. Like you said, we have a beautiful headquarters in Glendale. Like we might do something in Glendale for DesignerCon.
Right.
Like things like that. Like I said, possibilities are endless. I think we are looking forward to that future. And, and we have a lot of great artists and friends. Like what Joe said, when Ben and I approached Joe, and he was at the office, he was like, I don't want to do it, but I trust you guys. And that's why we put our name, DesignerCon, on this project. It's not like some random person going after an artist. Hey, I want to do an NFT project with you and kind of screw you over, right? That's not what it's about. That's why we have our name on there, of Vincents. And we stand by that. And then we want to work with all of our friends here, all these artists, eventually doing bigger things and down the road, because you're going to see different things from it. We have bigger plans for the project. It's not just going to be just a membership. It will grow from that.
Well, as I said, and I really stand by this, I, like Frank, agree that this is a new genre that's here to stay. It's also going to transform into other aspects of our life, like our health card or our payment methods or various different things that we carry with us digitally. But I think when we look back at 2021 and 2022, it's going to be the beginning of that next chapter of DCon. And I really do believe the Vincents is an important middle step where people get a little real world, a little virtual, because right out of the gate, they can justify what they can hold in their hand, so then the digital's a bonus. And then maybe if they get lucky and they get Frank's one-of-one, they're like, you mean I just bought this thing and now it's worth this? Now we have a new customer and somebody that believes in it with the rest of us. On behalf of everybody at DCon, thank you so much, Frank Kozik. Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you so much, Joe Ledbetter. And thank you so much, Kevin Cow. Appreciate all of you guys for showing up. Let's make some noise for these guys. Thank you very much. I will be back up here at 1 o'clock with the London police doing an interview. I hope to see you then. Thank you so much.